Hello tanks and tankettes, and also greetings sailors, because welcome to Sports Spotlight number 44, and this is going to be one of those ones where we have both tanks and ships. So I've got a pair of each for you today, and they're all jolly entertaining games, or at least I think they are. Now the theme, kind of today's video is going to be balance, because these are all very balanced machines. Well, actually, having said that, it doesn't quite fit, because one of them isn't particularly known for being imbalanced, but it is theoretically, technically kind of a Soviet destroyer in one of warships, and therefore it's Russian, and therefore it must be very balanced, right? Well, actually, it kind of is. It's an okay ship, but we'll get to that. But the rest of them are all very powerful in their own way. And the E-25, I don't think I really need to tell you about the E-25 too much. You know about the E-25. You've presumably been on the wrong end of this, and if you haven't, well, you're very lucky indeed. So this is Gade 2000 in a Tier 8 game, and this is actually a rather older game. This is 9.15, so this is why there's a mod hit log rather than just the standard in-game hit log. So this is one, I'm not going to say I've had it for ages and ages. I think it's one he sent to me, you know, a while after he'd actually had it, because sometimes that happens with new Patreons. They'll have all the replays that they wish to for me to have a look at, because you know, they were good games. They don't stop being good games just because they're from an older patch, and that's true in this case. Anyway, so he's taking some pot shots at this ISU, who has died, so that's a nice chunk of enemy firepower out of the way, and it's not looking too bad in terms of the numbers so far. It's 4-1, but then take a look at the northwest, because this is an encounter game, and as you can see, yeah, they just didn't have enough firepower there, and I think that's in part because they have a reasonable number of tank destroyers, and the tank destroyers were not so much inclined to go and be on the front lines. And they've also got a Panther that was sitting sniping as well, so in the northwest, where it matters, they are being taken apart. So Gade's pushed up, as has this LTTB, and he's going to prove to be rather important, even though he's now on very low health. And yeah, as you can see, they've run into an enemy gatekeeper, this Comet, who has decided to guard the enemy artillery. And that's a little bit of an issue, but, well, if they can chip away some health, then you know, they could take this guy out. But the LTTB can't really afford to take the hits, and Gade himself, it's not like he's got a lot of ammo, and just doing a straight trade would not be the best plan, in my opinion. But that's exactly what he's going to do. He is in fact just going to charge in, trade health, and hope this LTTB goes for it. Now, as it turns out, this Comet is rather unnecessarily firing full APCR rounds. Not really necessary against an E-25, but on the other hand, it's an E-25, and maybe he just thought he'd add that little bit of insult to injury. So Gade is coming very close to being knocked out here, but I think the Comet must have lost a loader, or maybe his ammo rack got turned yellow, because that final incoming shot, which may have killed Gade, didn't actually arrive. So that worked out, but it was a little bit risky. It's not like he communicated, it's not like he typed that that's what he was going to do. He just went in and hoped that the LTTB would be on the ball, and the LTTB was pretty close by, so there was a fair bet that it would happen, but it's still a bit of a gamble, given that this is an entirely random teammate. He doesn't know this guy at all, doesn't know if he's paying attention, doesn't know if he's a good player, although, having said that, he might have been using XVM, I don't know. Maybe he does know this guy's a good player, or at least a decent player. But anyway, so it worked out. It came at the cost of most of his health, but it worked out. So he's rushed forwards. The LTTB is actually now signalling him to stop, and it initially looked a bit dicey because it's an enemy E-25, except it's an AFK E-25. Maybe his client crashed, maybe he had to leave the game, who knows, but either way, that's just a free kill for them. Now in the meantime, of course, most of their team got a bit slaughtered. They've now got, apart from himself and this LTTB, 2 artillery and the Panther, and the Panther's in a really weird position. I don't know why the Panther's gone down halfway down that slope. The Burt I can understand being there because it doesn't have a lot of range, and he was trying to help his allies out. but the Panther's position is just a bit odd. Maybe he's gone down to try and cover the FE-304, but I'm not sure why he was in that position to begin with, that far back. Anyway, Gaday's spotted this. Also, seemingly AFK KV2. I'm not sure what happened there. You know, they were backed up against a wall to guard against being hit by artillery, perhaps, but yes, perhaps another crash, or they had to leave the game, or who knows. So that's another kill anyway, and it's now down to 4 versus 2, but it's very, very close, and this Panther's not going to last too much longer. Now he's on to the last couple of tanks, and he's going to have to use APCR for these, because the KV4 and the KV5. The KV5, if he can hit the radio man binnacle, his AP will be fine, but even from the rear, he's going to struggle with the AP. And he does have 20 APCR rounds, which is not particularly excessive for an E25, I would say. Although, for longer matches, given the rate of fire on this thing, it's entirely possible that you'll run into them quite frequently. But given that one of the things that was supposed to balance this was the weak AP penetration, yeah, a lot of the times you do find people firing a lot of APCR with these, but that's definitely not the case with Gaday. Anyway, can he save this Panther? No, the Panther gets rammed to death, and there we go. He does get that kill, but also, well, the LTTB died, the artillery have died, and so it's just him with his KV4. But note how he's not spotted. He sat here, more or less in the open, unspotted, firing away because E25. So, because he was in the E25 and had reached for the APCR rounds, which were necessary against those particular targets, he was able to make that a win, but it was a very close win indeed. And he actually said in his email he was particularly pleased that the LTTB had been as much of a help as he was, and as you can see, actually second place on the team, not that far behind Gaday himself, and he felt he couldn't have done it without that LTTB basically being on the ball at various points. So a bit of a high-risk game, but you can't really accuse him of sitting in a tiny bush and spamming APCR for the entirety of that one. It was not that sort of a match at all. Now, onto another completely balanced vehicle. Yes, it's the Mouse. And this one's actually getting some upcoming changes, if you are unaware. It's being tested even just on the test server right now. Super testers will have already had a go at it by the time it gets onto the test server. Yeah, what they're doing is they are removing that extra 200 hit points that they gave it, so it will go back down to 3,000 as it once had. They are removing some of the underneath armour, so the bottom plate of the tank, which apparently was 250mm, I didn't even know it was that much. It's now going down to 50mm, so that'll make it a lot more vulnerable to HE splash. So if you meet an OHO or a Type 4 or what's the tier 10, or is the Type 4 the tier 10? Or is that the Type 5? I can't remember. Anyway, one of the Japanese heavies with a derp gun, if they fire underneath your Mouse or an artillery shell splashes just the right way, then it will catch more damage than it will at the moment with that 250mm. And that 250mm base plate, I hadn't even realised it was that much. That's a ridiculous amount of armour for the bottom of a tank. The other big change that's coming to it, which is probably the biggest change actually, is it's losing 1.3 seconds on its base reload. So it won't be quite as versatile as it is at the moment. It won't be able to do quite as much damage as it can. But it's one of those things where having the DPM buff that it got, I think it was a bit too much. And I think this is just them adjusting it because the stats say they should adjust it. So you might be expecting me to go, oh my god, Mouse nerfs, it's the end of the world. Not really. I mean, you know, we'll see how it works out, but it seems pretty reasonable. You know, 200 fewer hit points and a 1.3 second extra reload time is it's alright. That sounds okay to me. They're not massively nerfing your aim time. They're not, you know, doing anything to the armour otherwise. So yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. Anyway, so this Fjord's game, as you can see, this is You Got Beat by a Girl, by the way. I probably should have said that already. She's one of my newer Patreons, and I don't know where I'm going with that thought, but anyway, yes, as you can see, it's gone terribly. The tanks that went to the town are the only tanks that have survived, and it was pretty much all the heavy tanks, whereas the enemy team just rolled through them from the north, and they could now be capping. They could easily get 3 tanks on the cap. But they're feeling greedy. It's 5-10. And ordinarily you'd think 5-10, that's fine. They'll easily take down these tanks. But 2 of those 5, well, 4 now, are... Wait, if it says 5... Oh, 5-11. Yes, okay, never mind. My brain went a bit, you know, as it does. 2 of those 4 are mice. What's the plural again? Is it moisture? Moisture, something like that. Or is that the tier... No, that's the tier 9, which is like Little Mouse or something. I can't remember. I'm going completely off base here, but never mind. This is what my brain does sometimes. This is, you know, if you're wondering why it is I've not been doing so many videos recently, it's because I keep having days where I just, you know, the thoughts come out in a variety of directions other than the direction I want them to go in, if that makes any sense. And it makes doing the videos a bit tricky because it just ends up being even more rambling nonsense than usual. Anyway, so the enemy team is overconfident is what I'm going for. And on the face of it, they have every reason to be confident, except maybe less so than when they started, because it's now 7-12. And this game maybe will illustrate, you know, a little bit why a mouse nerf is not a terrible thing. So that's Stridsvagen. It could have been nasty, and I think You Got Beat was quite aware of that, so she immediately reacted, but she got a nice shot in as well, and that guy's now taken all kinds of damage, which is kind of illustrates, you know, my issue with that particular line of tanks. I don't particularly like that line of tanks because they're just squashy, fragile, sit at the back, campy tanks. They don't have a lot of versatility to them. So he's still back there, but You Got Beat's in a more or less okay position, and there we go, he gets taken out by the other mouse. So this is looking increasingly like they should have capped, isn't it? She's now got 4 kills, 5,000 damage. We don't know what the other mouse has done. It's down to just the 2 of them now. And if they work together, if they stop each other just being overwhelmed, and at the moment it looks like the other mouse is in much more danger of that, then they can win this. And it will be because they are both in the mouse. Now she's actually realised that this guy's in trouble, he's actually pinging, and she's obviously had the thought of, well, I shouldn't let him get overwhelmed, because if they work together they can win this. But if she just lets him get overwhelmed, if he gets taken apart, then suddenly she's going to be having to deal with all these tanks herself. So there's that selfish element as well. But it's the, you know, the cooperation that will win the game here. 12-13. Yeah, this has been a bit of a reversal, hasn't it? So that's over 6,000 damage done, 5 kills, and we've sped things up a little bit here because, you know, the mouse is not the fastest. And they're down to a T-25 Pilot 1 and a Gorilla 15. And the remaining enemy team at this point has 2 options, really. They can either try and push for the cap, or they can defend their own cap. Or, well, having said 2, they could split up. But given that it's a low health Pilot 1 and a very fragile Gorilla 15, that seems unlikely. So they actually do that themselves. She suggests in the chat that one of them goes to the enemy cap, one of them goes to defend their own cap. And, well, that enemy mouse has been whacked, so we can have a guess that they've gone back to their own cap. We know at least the Gorilla is back at their own cap. We don't know for sure the Pilot 1 is. So she's come towards their own cap. There's the Pilot 1, so they are both here, and she's been spotted as well, so they know that they are both here. So there's 4 minutes left on the clock. There's the Gorilla 15. So that was the Pilot spotting for the Gorilla. The Gorillas obviously position themselves such that they can't be seen when firing. So this is an okay player we're dealing with here, and there they are. So this is someone with a decent crew, somebody that at least has some idea what to do in a fragile tank destroyer. Although again, it does basically involve sitting at the back and letting someone else spot for you. So 2 good hits from You Got Beat there, up to over 7,000 damage now. And if one of those had been an HE, that second shot might even have been the kill, but AP has the greater reliability in this case. So 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes rather, and the other mouse is rather low health, but You Got Beat, as you can see. Well, she's bounced quite a lot, and that's not even counting the, what, 1 or 2 shots, I think, that went in her tracks. Now she goes towards the cap to, or she was going towards the cap to try and root out that gorilla and maybe provide cover for the other mouse to move up to the cap, but the gorilla's been spotted going along the A line, so the other mouse is going for the cap, and it's basically just a case of preventing the gorilla from resetting, because there's enough time to cap, but if this gorilla resets, that's it, it's going to be a draw. It's not like warships where it's very, very difficult to get a draw. So You Got Beat assumes that the guy's heading back, but no, he's still over there. In fact, he's further over to the west, if anything, and as we come down to the final 15 seconds or so, yep, there he is. And unfortunately, well, she doesn't get any damage from that final hit from the gorilla, but she doesn't get the final kill herself. Now, because they, in the dying minutes of this, formed an in-game platoon, they actually get some medals out of that they wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, they had 9 kills between them. That was an ace for her, obviously. Also steel wall, high caliber, and a top gun. Was that a Spartan or a cool-headed, I think? And the Brothers in Arms medal, because they're in a platoon. And that's one of the nice things about the in-game platoon system, is that, you know, you can get a situation like this. You can form a platoon with the last 2 or no, I was going to say 2 or 3 people, but it would be 2 people at most, because that's how platoons work, and you can get an extra medal out of it. So yeah, that was a very good result. Over 7,000, nearly 8,000 damage done, over 6,000 damage blocked, and all because she was in a mouse and the other player was in a mouse. So, you know, I like the mouse. I really do like the mouse. I've always liked the mouse, but I think it does deserve a slight nerf, and that's what it's getting. So maybe we won't get results quite as good as that, but you'll still be able to do well in a mouse. So on to the warships, and this is actually a ranked game. Now this is the ship I was trying to say it's not OP, but you'd think it maybe was OP because it's technically a Soviet ship, but not really at the start, and that probably is even more confusing. But basically this is the Anshan. It's the Pan-Asian Tech Tree destroyer, which is basically a tier 6 Russian destroyer. So that's probably the simpler way of putting it. So ranked in warships, I'll maybe give a little rundown of that, because that's happening at the moment. It's a bit different from normal games. Now, if you're still watching and you're a tanks player and you maybe know how ranked works for tanks, well, I did do a video which got a few negative responses because people didn't like me talking about the differences between tanks and warships ranked over a tanks video, even though that was kind of what brought it to mind, and that was kind of the point, to illustrate the differences. But basically, in the ranked game mode in warships, it's different from a regular battle. In World of Tanks, it's more or less just a regular battle, but people behave differently. Warships ranked, well, the cap circles are different. It's a more limited pool of maps. The cap circles are distributed differently, and it's smaller teams. And also, I think the other big difference is that all of the winning team gets to advance a rank, or they get to advance by 1 star, and the closer to rank 1 you get, the more stars are required to advance, basically. Whereas I think with tanks, it's only the top 12 of 15 players, and it's like the top 3 of the enemy team that get to keep their progress, whereas in warships it's the top 1 of the enemy team. So if you're on a losing team, it can actually promote behavior. I mean, it's not, it was kind of greeted with a mixed response when he made that change, because it can promote behavior where it comes to a close situation, but people aren't playing to win, they're playing to be top of the team. So if you do lose, then you're not losing any progress. But on the other hand, if they'd done things differently and a bit more cohesively, instead of just trying to play to be top of the team and get the damage and the kills, and sometimes that can mean farming damage and getting, the wrong kills at the wrong time, that don't help at any given moment, then yeah, that can end up causing the loss. So it's not necessarily a great mechanic. You can see the idea behind it, that somebody's fought really hard, but they've been put in with a bunch of teammates that really haven't been trying, and so they don't lose their progress, which sounds great, but then you get the flip side of that. So there's no perfect way of doing it. There's always some downside. Anyway, this is... the name has escaped me. New Many, there we go. He's a new Patreon. Having said You Got Beat was one of my newer ones. This is one of my very newest ones. And this is the only game he sent me so far, so hence this is why I'm showing it. Now, I'm not entirely sure what server this is on. I know there's a smaller pool of people playing ranked on NA, so I think it's easier to recognise the same names over and over, and presumably that's true on the Asia server as well. But on EU, I don't think I've really... I've advanced a bit, and usually with ranked I get so far and then I just get fed up with the whole thing, because it can take a lot of battles to get down to rank 1. But yeah, I don't think I've really recognised the same names over and over. I don't know where I was going with this thought, but let's jump over into talking about the Anshan itself, because that would make more sense. So the Anshan, like I said, it's basically a Soviet destroyer, and what that means is it's a pretty capable gunboat. Doesn't have the turret traverse of, say, the Farragut, but the advantage of this over both the Farragut and the is it the Ognivoy still at tier 6? I can't remember. The actual Soviet line destroyer is this has 8-kilometer torpedo, so it can torpedo from stealth. Neither of those other destroyers can. Now, the Germans have also seen a reasonable amount of use in this one, because the German tier 6 is the first one to get hydro, and of the Japanese destroyers, the ones you'd think were possibly the best suited, well, they're not particularly great gunboats. The tier 6s aren't anyway, and it's actually the premium, the Shinonome, that seems to be the most popular of the Japanese, and I think in part that's because there was a recommendation from Flamu that it would be a decent ship. But I reckon the Anshan's probably quite a decent ship as well. I've mostly been playing the Bayern myself, but maybe I might mix it up a bit with something else. So this looked good initially. The enemy team was all split apart. His own team was reasonably cohesive, and well, now it's all gone kind of the other way. I mean, the enemy team is all still split up, which is not a good thing, and their own team has both cap circles. But their own team, well, I mean, the battleships don't seem to have done that much. And the two top scorers are going to be himself and this Perth. And hello, that's the enemy Gator. That's unexpected and unwelcome, and that won't be a widespread. But oh no, it was a widespread. Okay, I don't know why. Oh, he must have had a widespread to put out against the Budyoni. I didn't notice because I was too busy talking. Anyway, so that was a brown pants moment, and it's kind of lucky that that Gator apparently did not have torpedoes available. Otherwise, that might have been a bit of mutually assured destruction. So he's alive. He's taken out the enemy destroyer. It's one more kill. It's more points. But that completely gives the game away that is here, because I think he was hoping to sneak out, torpedo this Arizona in the face, and get some more points for their own team. And as it is, well, he's going to try it anyway, because they need the kills. But this Arizona is now forewarned. And if he wants to get close enough, well, there's the Budyoni behind him, and there's a Bayern that's going around to the north as well. So this is not good. Now, him doing this also means that he's leaving the Perth alone to deal with the Budyoni. And to be fair, the battleship's worth more points, but it's cost him a chunk of health. And it's not even guaranteed he can get this guy. Now, he killed the enemy Fuso already. He actually, I don't know if you noticed, but he dropped his torpedoes in a staggered fashion, so he only put out one launcher at a time rather than dropping both launchers. And what that meant was that the Fuso actually flooded rather nicely, because he got a flooding, having taken a hit on the nose, and repaired, and then the next torpedo struck him after a long enough interval that his damage control party cooldown was no longer applicable. So it wasn't active anymore. So he's smoked up, his smoke's come back, but you know, smoke will stop you being spotted. It doesn't stop people guessing where you are based on your firing. So in retrospect, we can say the wise thing to do would have been to hold fire and maybe even back out smoke and get behind the island. Now that also came at about the same moment the Perth died, unfortunately. He does still have a fire going on at Arizona, but it's now all in the hands of this Fuso, who hasn't done a lot. And spoiler alert, is not going to carry this game. Now I thought this might go on a little bit longer, but this Fuso is angling absolutely terribly and just takes a massive broadside. So he was still at half health, but that must have been some citadels, and just completely got wiped out. So that looked good. That looked, for maybe the first half of that, like they had an advantage over the enemy team, and if they worked together, that it would be alright, that they could pull through. But as it was, no. I mean, the battleships weren't particularly pulling their weight. They had a Nuremberg with 165 down at the bottom. I'm not quite sure how he died so quickly, but it can happen in a cruiser, to be fair. So as it was, you know, it looked initially good, and then it turned out it really wasn't. So that was a bit unfortunate, but these things happen in ranked all the time. You think you've got a nice advantage, and then people get impatient. And instead of holding position, instead of using the advantage and making the enemy team come to you and having the advantage of positioning, people rush in, and then suddenly what looked like a rather nice secure position where you had to make the enemy team do the work and take the risk, suddenly it flips all against you. So on to our last ship, and this is the Kutuzov, which is another premium, and this time an actual Soviet line premium, and acknowledged to be a very, very strong ship indeed. This is one I've got on both EU and NA. Now this is another new Patreon. I'm probably going to get this wrong. It's K325 or 385 or something. I don't know. It's K number. It's numbers. I'm never going to remember numbers. Anyway, we'll just stick with K. And the Kutuzov is one of those very few cruisers outside of the British line proper that can smoke. In fact, it was the first cruiser with smoke. Now, it's Soviet smoke. It isn't particularly long-lasting, but unlike the British cruiser smoke, it can lay quite a big cloud of it. The Kutuzov also has the benefit of having an exceptionally long range for having 6-inch guns, and also that means it benefits quite a lot from IFHE. So you can absolutely rain death from a very, very long distance, and also set people on fire a lot from a very, very long distance. And because it's a Soviet ship, it's got quite fast shells as well, so it's not like firing Cleveland shells at 19 kilometers, which would take an absolute age to get there. No, these are rather faster than that. I think it's what, 950 meters a second initial muzzle velocity. So yeah, on top of that, you know, it's got the smoke. It's got probably the best cruiser AA of a tier 8 cruiser. I could have just said best AA of a tier 8 cruiser, and instead I decided to be all redundant about it, but that's just how I am, I suppose. And it's also got 8-kilometer torpedoes, so it really is a good package. The only real downsides are the fact that it's a light cruiser, it doesn't have a lot of armor, and also being a Soviet cruiser, it does not maneuver well. It goes pretty fast in a straight line, but it's got a fairly large turning circle. So he's positioned himself somewhere where he could potentially smoke up if need be, but there's not a lot doing here. There's a fair few of his own team have come over, but it's beginning to look like, here on Two Brothers, that the push from the enemy team is coming around the other side. So this is in danger of turning into one of those carousel situations where most of each team goes around opposite sides, and then it becomes a race to cap or decap, as the case may be. And because it's Two Brothers, it's actually fairly easy to get down the middle, and it's quite suicidal earlier in a match, but that middle passage in the mid and late game can make a decisive difference. If somebody's trying to sneakily cap and you just nip down the middle and stop them. And I've seen games lost that way, where people decided that they were going to, you know, they were going to try and cap in an inappropriate moment, and instead of continuing around and harassing the enemy or coming back through the middle, they themselves in turn have somebody come through the middle and stop them, and you know, stuff like that can swing an entire match. So Kay has decided to help the defenders because the enemy team has just pushed right around, and we've only just lost a ship. You know, we're over 5 minutes into this and we've only just lost a ship, so it's not like there's a you know, the enemy team that came around that side steamrolled a bunch of enemy ships, steamrolled a bunch of his own team's ships even to do so. It's just that there weren't any ships there really to begin with. So this is a bit of a tricky situation because if everybody turns around to defend the cap, they're going to get a bunch of enemy ships coming up behind them, and then they're caught in a pincer movement. Or alternatively, if the ships that pushed round to the east flank, like if they decide to push forwards and try and be aggressive, it's probably going to go badly as well because they'll probably be outnumbered. So really they just need to kind of hold off those enemy ships without pushing too aggressively. And the question is, well, will they do that, or will they rush in and die? And I'll let you guess. I'll let you guess how that one goes. So Kay's laid down his own smoke, but this helpful Benson lays down some as well. And you might think that's a bit redundant, but the Benson smoke is going to last a lot longer. And it could be the Benson, in passing, decided just to do that, saw the smoked Kutuzov, didn't know how long the Kutuzov smoke was going to last for, but decided to plonk down his own because he knew it was going to last longer, rather than hang around, wait for the Kutuzov smoke to dissipate, put down his own smoke, and then go and do what he wants to do. So I can see why the Benson smoked him then, rather than hanging around, because sometimes hanging around like that, waiting to smoke somebody up, can put you out of place when you want to be somewhere else and engaging the enemy. So it's not looking too badly so far. They haven't actually killed anything. They are 2 ships down, but this is not the situation where I'd be panicking. Now that Kagero to the north could be a problem. There is also the other enemy destroyer around somewhere. I think he's to the north. Yes, Kagero's to the south rather. So I think it's 2 Kageros. Yeah, it is. It's 2 enemy Kageros. So those could be a problem just because they're very stealthy. And the fact that they've got their own reasonably stealthy destroyers helps. It's not like the enemy team has got a pair of stealthy Japanese destroyers and they've got Soviet destroyers, which are not stealthy at all. Anyway, so that enemy could have just taken a big whack from somebody. I mean, if Kay's shot can finish him off, that would be nice. But although he does get some hits, it's not enough to kill him. So he's managed to make it behind that rock. So they've seriously blunted this enemy attack so far, and there's actually now maybe some ships turning back, some enemy ships turning back to their own cap, because as we can see, at least a couple of the ships followed round. I think we lost, what was it, a Genizer now already, something like that, and we've also got a pair of battleships that are just on their own going towards the enemy cap versus vastly superior numbers of enemy ships, which of course is going to work out well, as you will imagine. So there's that Kutuzov. I'm not quite sure why he poked out there. It's not going to go well. So he's down, that's good. The York and the Pensacola aren't that huge of a threat to an angled Kutuzov. I mean, the torpedoes could be if they got close enough, but if he gets broadside hit by this Tirpitz and gets unlucky, and this Tirpitz does appear to be firing on at him from a fair range, because that Tirpitz is, yeah, there we go, he's heading back towards his own cap. That could be nasty. There's also a destroyer still around somewhere to deal with. So he has to be mindful of that Kagero, because he doesn't have a spotter plane, he doesn't have hydro. All he has is his own wits and the knowledge that there is a destroyer there. So I think that's the Pensacola that's popping some shots at him. I mean, it won't be the Tirpitz any longer. And there we go, there's the Pensacola, who is just kind of sat there. Not sure why. He's now at a terrible angle. I mean, he had to have seen this unfolding, and for some reason he just decided to sit there more or less broadside. And seeing that this guy's more or less broadside, well, Kay has decided to go for the AP shells, because much like being a broadside cruiser to an Atlanta or a Flint, this thing, just with the sheer number of AP shells it can put out, hell, even the Chapayev, of course, which also has these 6-inch guns, it's not going to go well for you. It will result in potentially a lot of citadels, because these are fast, fairly accurate Soviet 6-inch guns. Now, he didn't get any citadels out of that guy, and the Pensacola has kind of managed to get away, but he's now broadside to a Bismarck, and he's got all kinds of things shooting at him. So, yeah, I was about to say the main threat, the main unknown is that Kagero, but we can now tell where the Kagero is by the direction those torpedoes have come from. So instead of harassing them from the north, which is what their own Akizuki seems to have been trying to position himself for, to go along. I keep saying the north when I mean the south. Anyway, to go along the J line. He's now, as it turns out, completely out of position, because that enemy Kagero has pulled back with his teammates. So they're chasing these retreating cruisers. I mean, the Tirpitz already pulled all the way back. There's also a Hood over here, as it turns out, who does have the speed to get away if he wants to. And, of course, the destroyer dropping stuff in their path. All the stuff on the other side has pretty much died. Are you surprised? No, of course not. Because, you know, it's one of those things where you can see it coming from a mile off, but apparently the player that it was happening to couldn't see it coming from a mile off. So, there you go. So much for pattern recognition. That's one of the things sometimes you do, like, this is going to be more relevant with a ranked game of my own, where it was basically a single player managed to throw it, and it was a battleship with nearly full health. Because they'd done next to nothing. Well, actually, having said that, they'd done next to nothing. Now, they'd done something, but it was a rather inexplicable something. But I looked up afterwards their stats, because I was curious. And it turned out they had over 14,000 battles. Now, for reference, I've got like 3,000 and something. So this is somebody with, what, like over 4 times the battles I've got? And yet, it was like watching somebody in a tier 1 ship play. So this is one of the things that you learn playing games like World of Tanks and World of Warships, and really any online game, is that even somebody having done something a lot, like a lot, having spent hundreds and maybe even thousands of hours at one activity, doesn't mean they're going to have a clue. You can still see people with 14,000 battles in warships, which is probably the equivalent of like 30k battles in tanks, maybe, just kind of roughly doubling it, close to 30k, let's say. Yeah, that can just seem utterly hopeless, and sometimes there can be like absolutely understandable reasons why somebody, even with a lot of battles, doesn't play well, but most of the time it's just because they're a bad player. And that says nothing about their enjoyment of the game necessarily, but it does say something about what they're doing to other people's enjoyment of the game, potentially. So those battleships having charged ahead and not apparently having had a clue that it was going to be an absolutely fatal move for them, it does not surprise me in the slightest. And that was a very, very long-winded way of saying it, apparently, but there you go. So there was a Tirpitz trying to come through the middle, didn't work out for him, but Kay has lost a bunch of health, so this seems an opportune time to use one of his smokes, because that's another pair of battleships coming around the corner. And there's also potentially another Bismarck coming through the middle, because there was one last spotted heading that way. And there's the Kagero as well, so this is all getting a little bit exciting. Now, it's a good thing he didn't get citadeled by that Bismarck that came round. I mean, it did seem to be mostly overpens, so that was a bit of luck. But he does now have the problem of, well, we know the Kagero is there. He's got those 2 battleships pushing in. He does have his own torpedoes. Oh, there's the Kagero torps. It's a wide spread, so he's able to quite easily dodge. And, yeah, there's also the Bismarck having made this appearance. So there's not a lot he can do except sit in the smoke, hope that it doesn't run out too quickly, and that he can help this Allied Bismarck take these guys down. And the Benson's over here as well. There is an Edinburgh who isn't, there we go, in an immediate position to help, but he is maybe helping keep off the Hood and the other Kigero. So that's the destroyer threat immediately dealt with. His smoke is starting to go. The new mechs, as you can see, low health. I think that's largely thanks to the Bismarck. And this is maybe doable, but if he gets shot by anything, you know, it's not going to go well. These are both tier 8 battleships, one with a 16-inch and one with 15-inch guns. So the Bismarck's not going forward, which leaves him free to put out torpedoes. They are reasonably okay torpedoes on this thing. I mean, you can have pretty good spread off them. This is one of the things that makes this ship quite dangerous. They're not as good as Atago torpedoes, let's say, but they're still pretty good for cruiser torps. So he's put out his port spread. This Bismarck didn't follow through, the enemy Bismarck that's in the channel. And so if he wants to get this guy, if he comes around the corner any time now, he has to use his starboard launcher. The good news is they've removed the threat from the east flank, but they've still got ships to their west. The Edinburgh's still alive, the Benson's still alive, and well, it's really come down to it, because look at the points. 474 versus 476 versus 474 now. Every single kill matters immensely at this stage. And because this is a standard game, there's no, you know, back and forth with the cap circles. It's all down to the kills. We're also running out of time. We're down to the last 3 minutes. So this is going to be tight. This is going to be very tight. I'll also draw your attention to the fact that he's done 140,000 damage, which is pretty good. And it's the kind of, like, in a decent game myself, you know, I can fairly easily reach that. So anyway, there's the Bismarck, and that had to be another brown pants moment. Different replay, but same brown pants. Yeah, that could easily have killed him. The torps were already out, but he'd be dead. And although battleship's hit points are worth more than a cruiser's hit points, I'm sure he would much rather have survived, all things considered. So he's alive for now, but he's now down to 2,600. It's not going to take much more to kill him, and these are healthy enemies, and that's a Kigero shooting him, and that's Kigero torps. There's torpedoes. Did you not notice the torpedoes? Oh dear. Yeah, no, that's going to be what kills him. There we go, K538. I was completely getting the numbers mixed up, but it actually said there when he got killed, so now we know. I got it right towards the end of the game. So he has died. It's back in the enemy team's favour, but not by much. They can just kill a few more ships, especially this Hood. They can do this, but it's so close. As for his effort, though, 177k, almost 178k. That's pretty damn good, and whatever else happens, this is going to be a very profitable game. Getting that much damage in a premium in warships is guaranteed to be at least 500,000 credits, if not more. In fact, probably a lot more, depending on what flags. So the Hood went down, the Chapayev went down, and it just left that Kigero left alive, but it was enough points to win when the timer ran down to 0, crucially. So there we go, 178k, devastating strike, Confederate, double strike, high caliber, and the coveted Kraken. So that was very, very good. That was a good Kutuzov game, but that's the kind of ship it is. It can pull off those kind of results because it's just got a bit of everything, and especially with those 6-inch very long range laser guns, it's really a ship that, you know, it's easy to screw up in because it's a tier 8 cruiser and it's easy to lose a lot of health very quickly in, but it's got such a powerful toolbox at its disposal that yeah, the Kutuzov is definitely an enemy ship to be treated with respect. So there we go, that's it. I've managed to make it all the way through a video without, you know, completely messing up, which has not been at all true for most of the weeks recently, and that's meant that this particular supporter spotlight has been a bit overdue, but I can only say a big thank you to my patrons for all being very patient and understanding, and having the forbearance for me to, you know, scrape some brain cells together sufficient to actually produce this video. So I don't know if we're going to get back to quite a normal video production schedule yet, but you know, if I can sit down and do this, it bodes well. And I managed to do the operations video as well, and I've got stuff lined up. I've got stuff I want to do. It's just a matter of, can I do it? So, time will tell. Anyway, enough rambling. I really should, stop rambling. So, I guess that's it for now. That's it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it, and if you have, you can leave in the comments below. You can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.